You are not bad at studying. You've just been doing it the hard way this entire time. Think about it. You read 4 pages in an hour, you watch a video, you make some notes, and then a day later it's like you learned nothing. Meanwhile, that all-A-star kid in your class, they barely try and end up knowing everything like this. But what if I told you it's not about their memory, it's about how they think while learning. They're not focusing on rereading and rote memorizing, they're cleverly linking different concepts. They're always analyzing and critically thinking about how one idea explains another. And in the moment that their brain makes those connections, everything suddenly makes sense. It's that higher order thinking that allows them to subconsciously learn much faster than the rest. And so in this video, I don't want to just tell you another method. I want to train you to think and relate information as smartly as possible during your studying, exactly like a top student does. Treat this as a one-to-one coaching session with me. That means go get a pen and paper and lock in. We're doing practical exercises together. We're going step by step, because by the end of it, I want your brain to be able to learn deeper, faster, and smarter than ever before. Just like that all-A-star genius in your class. Imagine you are studying these 2 topics. These are the 2 paragraphs about them. I want you to read them and learn them. Pause the video right now. No, stop. I can't put you through that. Even if you read them front to back, you will not remember all of the specific information on there for more than a day. Why? Because reading is shallow processing. Your brain isn't doing anything with the information. So new task. Instead of reading one topic fully and then the second one, read 1 to 2 sentences of the first topic and then jump immediately to the second topic. Then back to the first one, then back to the second one. Keep jumping back and forth, forcing yourself to compare throughout. Go. Now, the majority of you probably didn't do that, but before I show you what I did, can I please ask you to just look at them one last time? Think about one similarity, one difference, one relation, anything that you can think about between them that relates them. Can you think of even one good one? For the ones that I made while reading, I'll show you. Now, these are all the relations and the comparisons that I came up with. It literally took me 2 minutes, but my main point is, did you notice how this side-by-side way of reading made understanding what arteries and veins are, how they work, so much easier? That's because your brain wasn't just monotonously reading. It was actively organizing information by comparing between the 2 things. It wasn't just memorizing, it was looking at the differences and the distinctions between the 2 things, the similarities between them, and that is the actual learning. Of course, this is like a super basic topic to go through and show, but that was my point. I wanted to show it through a super basic topic because this is the foundation for how to think throughout your entire studying process. Now that you understand how easy learning becomes when you just do something with the information, when you relate the information, when you link it, try and connect it. Next question you're gonna ask me is, how do I relate? What does that even mean? So let me give you the 5 practical steps, the 5 exercises that literally anyone can do while they read, even as a complete beginner. I used them when I started as well. That is what you need to start doing to train your brain. These exercises, if you implement them, will help you connect and link everything that you're studying like this. First and foremost, let's stop studying our topics like they're going to be isolated and separated islands in our head. Everything in one of your subjects is linked, all of the topics within it. So your aim should be to study 3 to 4 related, most similar topics together. That means the first task that you have to do is to pick a subject that you have, something that you're struggling with, and group all of the topics within that subject, 3 to 4 topics per group, each group containing topics that are related to each other. You're doing this again so that you can go through each of these groups so you can study 3 topics together side by side. Don't make the groups randomly. I spend an hour to 2 hours before I start a specialty to group up all the diseases and conditions that I need to know, because this is how I'm going to be learning these conditions. This is how I'm going to be thinking about them in all of my future revisions and probably as a doctor. So pick 3 to 4 topics that are naturally linked together so that you can categorize them. Here's how you do it. List out all the topics that you have within that subject and actually identify what each of them is about. Go on Google. Do a quick Google search and then think, which of these can I divide up and logically match together and then study together? Can I group these topics by causes, by effects, by their location? Are there different types of a certain thing? Are they different stages within a process? For example, instead of trying to study every single one of these eye conditions separately and then trying to remember which is which because they all end up actually affecting that small organ in your head, what I did was I categorized the eye emergencies together, the permanent immediate vision loss losses, the issues, the main issues that I need to look out for. Then I did the ones that cause red eyes. Then I did the ones that cause age-related slower eye issues. Point is, this activity of categorizing the topics means that you're looking for patterns between them right from the start. You're going from a huge list of topics that is going to be there in your laptop that you're not going to look at fully until your exams, to then a few big categories that actually help organize the subject and help you make sense of it. And that means your brain is actually creating a big picture structure so that you can put information in it while you're learning. You'll know where information goes when you're learning, when you're relating it to something. You'll actually have somewhere to put the information into in your head instead of just random scattered pieces of info that you're trying to memorize. So your task is to now pause, literally just spend time and group up all the topics within a subject of your choice like so. Trust me, yes, it might take a bit of time to figure out. You might have to be a bit creative. You might have to group and then regroup. But this is what gives your brain a way to think about it before you do any proper studying. If you don't do it, you need to, it is invaluable. I'm giving tasks, by the way, throughout this video because these are things you can actually do right now. These are steps that you need to be thinking while you're doing the reading, while you're doing the learning. Only if you do these exercises while you're reading and going through the topics will you actually learn. You will not learn if you just read and make notes. You have to go through the topic again and again. Now, step 2, what you need to do is pick one of these groups that you've made with 3 to 4 topics in there and think of a simple visual drawing that can represent what all of these 3 topics are on one image. And then actually draw this diagram or drawing or whatever out. Because the thing is, if you only put your brain in the mode of studying with text, it's a lot harder. Your brain processes things separately, it doesn't work. But when you create visual images, especially one image that represents 3 different topics, everything becomes a lot clearer. The basic connection, the basic differences between these 3 topics becomes very obvious. And trust me, this is something that will stick in your head forever. So pause right now and do it with one of the groups that you made with 3 of the topics that you chose that are related together. Either that, or if you didn't do that, then just do it with the 4 main types of ACS, acute coronary syndrome. Look that up. There are 4 types. Think about how you can visualize them. Remember, one image, one diagram, one thing that represents them all. Now, this doesn't take very long. I hope you actually did it because this visual drawing is like a memory anchor. Your brain will remember and differentiate between all 3 of these topics using this one singular image. Now, the way I actually recommend you do this is while you start to study and gain the basics and you're reading a bit about each of these topics, again, remember, side by side reading through them, you actually start to think about what visual image relates these 3 things. How can they be linked on an actual drawing? All it is a rough drawing that then represents these 3 topics. But what this exercise while you're learning is doing is that it is forcing you to think about and try and find this common ground between all 3 topics and then find a way to visually represent it. To be honest, at times when I'm lazy, it forces me to study multiple of these topics side by side and actually put my comparison and analysis hat on. And again, it's such a simple exercise that you can literally spend a few minutes on and come up with. I'll put up my simple diagram of the acute coronary syndromes. And again, the way I came up with it wasn't myself half the time. Half the time I come up with these diagrams when I'm watching a video, when I'm actually watching something visual and I'm like, oh, this is how they're drawing it out. This heart thing I can put in the middle and I can draw 4 vessels around it that represent the degree to which the pathology is occurring in them. And then boom, that is my memory anchor. That diagram is very simple, but it is how I will think about differentiating between the different types of ACS probably forever. And the thing is, you can do it with every subject. I'm doing it with so many different types of my students in the coaching program. It's because every single subject, whether maths, geography, chemistry, whatever it is, all of them have a conceptual base. Now, before we take the next step and I show you the different exercises you can do while you're learning to relate the information, the more details, the conceptual things. Instead of you just regularly note-taking or storing all the information in your head, a tool that can help with organizing all of this information visually is eDrawMind. This is a mind mapping tool that is useful during the studying process because, as you can see, let me show you. You open it up, you add the main topics on there, you can then add the headings, again, side by side, and then you add more information stemming out from each of those headings with subheadings, gradual details as well you can add. And the reason I would recommend actually creating these flowcharts of information when it comes to these topics instead of the regular note-taking is because you can visually add onto the topics side by side and be comparing them throughout. By doing this way, you actually compare between them. You find the differences, the similarities. You create links between the topics, and that process is essential to learning. That is what learning is. When you actually do something with the information that you're reading and think about it, whether it makes sense, where it fits in my bigger picture, which of these concepts can be compared between the subtopics, etc. Doing this active process is a lot more preferable rather than just you passively reading things and then noting things down. Drawing these digital mind maps out is also very easy using this tool. You don't see that many of them having this capability because a lot of them are just online. There's a huge variety of designs, there's infinite canvases available. I think it's especially useful if you create two side-by-side flowcharts or two side-by-side like timelines or processes, and then you compare between them. It's actually one of the exercises that I recommend later on in this video, purely because it helps with actually relating the different steps of those flowcharts while you read. Design-wise, as you can see, you can move information around easily as well. All of this is supporting flexible learning while still allowing us to structure the chapters that we're studying. And if you are particularly short of time, there's a one-click mind map feature where you generate entire or parts of the mind map, as well as an automatic AI mind map to PowerPoint format as well, which again can aid with your learning. It's a different format and it can help with teaching the content to others as well. My take on this is that I'd be careful and not rely on AI generating the mind maps and all this information solely, because you do need to put in some effort and active process in your learning, but it can definitely help with efficiency and for the times that you want a quick thorough overview of the topics, and it gives that. Essentially, I get asked a lot about mind mapping softwares, and this is a great one. Of course, it doesn't replace that written mind map that you draw out using as the base of your topics that you fully structure in your head and create, but it can serve as a crucial intermediate step when you're studying. If that's something that you might see yourself incorporating into your study process that intrigues you, that you might want to try out, click the link in the description to download it. Again, eDrawMind, if you're interested, link in the description to download it. Check it out. Super useful tool. Now comes step 3. You're reading about the 3 topics in a bit more detail now. But what do you now think about in order to actually learn the details, the actual specific things that you need to know for your exams? Most of you will read through a section, try and memorize it through repetition, and then move on to the rest of it. But the top students, they don't learn from repetition. They learn from finding distinctions, from finding comparisons, from making sure these topics have a structure, have somewhere to go in their head so that they remember it later on. Think about it. If you meet 3 people named Hamza, you'll mix them up. But if one Hamza works in Tesco's and is like super tall, the second one is hilarious and has a lisp and talks like this, and then the third is your loud neighbor that just is cooking with loud music all the time. Suddenly, you have 3 different pictures and you'll remember all 3. Why? Because your brain locked in the differences between them and had a way to think about them. And this is exactly how you need to train your brain to process information. Instead of learning each part of each topic separately, you need to be actively comparing them side by side. I've been saying it throughout this video because of how important it is, because that linking between concepts makes absorbing a lot easier. And the thing is, no one really teaches you how to relate and link the information. They just say do it, and how does that make sense? People don't know how to do that naturally. So these are 3 exercises that I initially was using in order to learn to relate, to compare as practically as possible. Number 1, draw a Venn diagram out. It's super easy. Literally, it's 2 circles where the middle is the similarities and the outer parts are the differences. Let's say you're learning about bacteria and viruses. Instead of you going through every single one of their properties and trying to memorize them, create a Venn diagram. You could put both cause disease and can kill humans. Both can be spread by sneezing and coughing. Both have no nuclei. On the differences side, one of them can be killed with antibiotics and can reproduce on their own, whereas the other one can't be killed with antibiotics and can't reproduce on their own. They need a host. Now that was basic, but do you understand how that forces your brain to think and compare? Rather than memorizing a list, I'm comparing and actually using my brain to understand the information. By doing this exercise of thinking what's similar between them and what's different between them, and actually using that thinking process, I stop myself from just memorizing this list of facts about each of them. And instead, I'm giving myself a framework to think about these topics. And this applies to anything, whether it's 2 wars that you're learning about, 2 chemical equations that you have, 2 inventions, 2 psychological theories. Regardless, it is an excellent way to relate and compare the information in your topics. Second, the mirror flowcharts. Make 2 flowcharts out fully and compare them. If you're studying any sort of step-by-step processes, whether it's how 2 different diseases are progressing, or whether it's how a patient is being managed, investigated, treated, the entire steps associated with the guidelines that I have to think about as a doctor. Or even if it's different processes when it comes to different trials in civil law. What you need to be doing is drawing the flowcharts out side by side so that you can compare between them. It forces your brain to see where the processes are kind of similar and can be related, where they line up and where they're completely different, where they break up. Again, it's an invaluable exercise because you're not only just laying the entire process out and seeing how each stage is progressing to the next. You're also, as I said, comparing between both the processes. Just make sure they are comparable and they are kind of similar because that is what will give them value. For example, I always compare how in 2 similar conditions the patient presents, how they're investigated, managed, diagnosed, all of it, so that I can make links and remember what are the distinctions here, what are the things that go hand in hand, what are the main things that I need to do all the time as a doctor. And finally, the third exercise is reverse thinking, flipping the cause and effect. Now again, please focus on doing the first 4 exercises first because they are the more easier ones that you can do during your learning, whereas this is something where you have to kind of use and juggle information in your brain. Okay, so most students just read Newton's law, force causes acceleration, or they think about heart attacks, they think plaque buildup causes myocardial infarction. And then they just try and memorize those facts, try and repeat them in their head. And of course, it's easy if you just think about those 2 facts, but imagine having to do 40 facts per topic, you know? So the next activity for you to better remember the details and create a deeper understanding is to think about the whole topic or process in reverse. Flip the entire thing that you're reading about and ask yourself questions about it. Newton's law, force causes acceleration? No. Reverse it. If the object is accelerating, what are all the forces that could be possibly acting around it? What forces would need to act in order to decelerate? What would be different in those scenarios? If clogging up your arteries causes heart attacks, what actually is going on to clog those arteries? What are all the different things in the body that can be affected by the clogging of those arteries? This really works well because once you come up with a way to think about the topic, once you have a structure in your head and you're like, yeah, I understand this. This is an exercise that you can be doing to then question your initial understanding, to question the way you think about the topic. When you learn in one direction, yes, you think you understand it, but you'll forget it 2 days later. Your brain is building a very weak connection. But when you can flexibly think about the concept in different scenarios, when you can question the understanding, the initial understanding that you have, that process, that thinking, that extra thinking that's happening in your head is what builds a strong, multi-layered connection between the topics, between the things that you're learning, that makes it very difficult to actually forget. I try and do this all the time when I'm thinking about diagnosing patients. If they come in with a group of symptoms, what other systems could be affecting that in order to cause those symptoms? This is how scientists solve problems, how historians make sense of events. And when you start to think about these topics in different scenarios, when you try to flip it, reverse them, when you try to attack your understanding as it already is, that is the process that actually makes it deeper, makes the base that you're learning super strong, and then helps you remember for much longer. And by the way, what you need to do, I can't force you to do it within this video right now because you actually have to start studying the topics that you grouped up earlier. But when you start studying them, your task is to try at least the first 2 exercises that I gave, which is the Venn diagrams and the flowcharts. You need to try them out in your very next study session while you study the 3 topics that you've already grouped. The point of all of these exercises, grouping the topics, categorizing them, then linking the basics of the 3 topics in a simple diagram or drawing, then actively comparing all the information within them by drawing Venn diagrams or flowcharts. All of it is to help you actually do something with the information while you read. This is you using the information you're reading so that you can compare it to each other and to other topics that you've learned about. If you are not actively doing something with the information, you will never efficiently build strong connections, and as a result, you'll not remember what you learned for more than a few days. By the way, if you actually want to get better at memorizing and remembering what you're reading, I have a full 30-minute guide on how to do this with steps, practical actions, all of it. Very worthwhile watch. Check it out if you're interested. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I really hope that this video has helped you understand the importance of relating information while you're reading, and it has given you a few practical ways to do it, because a lot of people talk about how to do it, but never state the methods and give you those practical exercises. Anyways, regardless, I hope this video helped. Please leave a like, spam the comments, subscribe if you already haven't, and I will see you in the next one.